In his much-anticipated speech, U.S. President Barack Obama warned the American people that the military campaign against ISIS would be a long-term challenge. His strategy includes building a broad coalition of partners. Well, the president also said his campaign would not be like the two wars begun by his predecessor, George W. Bush. Instead, it would involve selective airstrikes like his campaigns in Yemen as well as in Somalia. Well, Benjamin Friedman is a research fellow in defense and homeland security with the Cato Institute. He writes about U.S. defense policy focusing on strategy, budget, and war, and joins us now from Washington, D.C. And Richard Weitz is a military strategy analyst. He is director of military analysts for the Hudson Institute and also joins us from Washington. I want to ask both of you, I'm going to throw this out here in terms of the president's speech itself. A number of people are saying, guys, that he really has not said anything more than what has been done in the past already, except for hoping that he has a broad-based coalition, which it doesn't seem like he has.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to start, and I think that's true. I think what the president did the other night was to justify what we're already doing with the addition of the idea that we might start bombing in Syria, but it's really just an articulation of the strategy we had, not really a new strategy, and I'm also skeptical about the nature of the strategy itself.
Richard, I've got to ask you that also, the question, this coalition of the willing, it seems like kind of a weak coalition. A number of Arab countries have signed on, but they're kind of reluctant about this because, of course, they're reluctant about the U.S. becoming involved again in the Mideast, I guess we could say a third time.
Yes, I mean, this is not unusual. Most of the coalitions the United States has been involved with, you've got some very strongly committed partners, typically the British. And then you have some who are participating mostly nominally. We saw that in Afghanistan with the caveats in which many countries limited what we could do with their forces. Saw that in Libya with some countries, such as the Germans, sitting out entirely. We're seeing that now. It's not unusual. That's why it's called a coalition of the willing. The countries pretty much decide what they're willing to contribute, and in many cases they're comfortable basically giving a formal public support, but letting the U.S. exert most of the effort and incur most of the costs.
Benjamin, I've got to ask you this. Of course, France, and I would almost say reluctantly signed on to do airstrikes. We were concerned. In fact, I think initially they said they weren't going to do this. But we also have our ally, Turkey, and of course also in NATO. They really haven't signed on to any of this.
Right. Well, the problem with Turkey is that they helped create some of the conditions that led to ISIS. I think the United States would be very happy if we could get them to focus on basically solidifying the border, limiting support and infiltration from Turkey to ISIS, basically providing a lot of critical behind-the-scenes support to help reduce some of the sources of recruiting for ISIS and its financial support.
Benjamin, I want to ask you the next question in terms of the whole sectarian concerns that have been in that region, I guess, for centuries, if not longer than that. You've got a Sunni situation in there, and they've expressed some concerns about the United States coming in. I guess the question is, because there's so many factions there, is this a situation that we can really win, even with ISIS being the threat that many people believe that they are?
I think it's a very difficult thing that the president wants to do, which is to use a small amount of force to try to create conditions in Iraq that are going to eradicate ISIS. What's required is a lack of support from the Sunni tribes who previously turned against al-Qaeda in Iraq, and that has to do with the nature of the government in Baghdad, and the United States is insisting that that government be a centralized, unified one, except for the Kurdish areas. And I think a more serious strategy would allow more autonomy for the Sunnis, and more importantly, I think we just don't know how to run Iraq. I think we've proven that. So I think we need a more restrained and modest approach to what we're doing there.
Richard, would you agree with Benjamin's assessment?
Yes, I think that Benjamin basically puts to quite clearly the concern that many people have here. We certainly don't want to end up with a return to the Iraq War and the major kind of commitments we saw under previous years, under previous administrations. And I don't think this president really was going to take us there. I think he really thinks that through a limited judicious use of force, you can basically defeat what should be not considered a major threat yet, and an organization that has pretty much declared war on most of the major world countries. So it should collapse of its own weight. The key problem is after we get rid of ISIS, we've got to create conditions to prevent a reoccurrence. I mean, if we just go in there, destroy a terrorist group, and then another one comes back a few years later, that really doesn't get us anywhere. We got to think about how to get some kind of long-term enduring solution to this problem.
Well, Richard, that is the key question. We've seen that happen so many times. In fact, some people say that's the reason why we are in the situation we are in right now in the Middle East, and that our country, and not our country, the United States, has bungled this thing in many, many ways. I want to ask both of you this question. What do you see here being the end game? President Barack Obama has said that he does not anticipate, and there won't be any American boots on the ground. I'm wondering if you may be able to eat those words. But how long do you think this conflict will last, and what will be the end game? Benjamin, I want to start with you.
I think we're going to have a problem because air power with an Iraqi military that's remained unprofessional despite years of training might not oust ISIS. And our unwillingness to cooperate with Bashar Assad in Syria means that ISIS will continue to have a haven in Syria because arming moderates there is a fantasy that doesn't really do anything about ISIS on that side of the border. So I don't think this is going to work. And if it does, it won't be because of what we did. So we have to face up to the fact that we're going to be stuck with this situation maybe in a couple years. And at that point, what might give is U.S. public support, which is likely to decline. Maybe then there'll be pressure to escalate and send in ground forces. But I think what's more likely is we'll basically have to give up and live with the situation that's not perfect.
Okay, Richard, you have the last word.
I think that what we're going to see is this group, because of its extremist policies, is going to alienate many of the bases of support. I think in Iraq it's not going to be there that long. I think that the combination of the U.S. intervention and the regional players lined against it, especially if we can turn Turkey around, will really lead to a collapse of the movement there. I agree, though, with Benjamin, in Syria is a much harder problem. I don't see it's going to be difficult to get rid of it in Syria, and if we do, it's going to be the Assad government that's going to do it.
Yeah, we'll see if those assessments hold up. Benjamin Friedman and Richard Weitz, thank you so much for your insight, sirs.
Thanks.
Thank you.